All right, yo, what's up, guys? Welcome to the Nihilo podcast. Today is what's the 13th, 14th? This is episode 14. I'm super excited. We have a special guest, and I'll let her introduce herself in a bit. I'll just let the song finish playing. Cool. So I had the chance to interview Ellie, and she directed me to you. And so I'm just gonna let you introduce yourself.
Okay, cool. My name is Lily Soleil Correa Levitas. I'm a multifaceted artist based here in San Diego. I don't list off all the things that I do just because it's too much.
Yeah, no, for sure. So I'm so glad that Ellie referred me to you just because you seem like a really cool, fun person.
Thank you.
She did mention that you started the
Picture Party.
The Picture Party. So how did that even start?
Yeah, so Picture Party was this San Diego-based community that I started in San Diego. Back in 2016. So I was 16 years old. And it started because at the time there was some other sort of Instagram influencers and photographers in San Diego that were doing meetups. That's essentially what the formula was. They'd pick a time in the day and they'd go hang out somewhere. And I believe the first one that group had done was at the pier. What was that? What's that park with the roller coaster by Mission
Belmont?
Beach? Yeah,
Belmont Park.
Belmont Park. And so they did that, and then someone that I was shooting with that was modeling for me, and we kind of became friends. They went to it and they're like, Lily, we should host our own since we're hanging out all the time and shooting anyway. Let's just bring other people around us and do it. And I was like, yeah, that sounds fun. But I remember I specifically was then I just went on and kind of did my own thing and brainstorming. And I was like, what if it's called Picture Party? And I put I draw a hat on every poster and I do all these things. And I just created a whole brand identity without her even asking me to. And I remember I came back to her and I was just so what if we call it a picture party and we do it every month, whatever. And she was like, that's kind of corny, the name, not gonna lie, we can just do a meetup, it's fine. And I was like, you're welcome to do your own thing. I just I'm sticking to it. So if you want to do it, I want to call it that. And so we did, and we held it at Petco Park. Sorry, I feel like I'm not breathing.
No worries, you're good.
We held it at Petco Park, and we had 30 people show up. Mostly from her end. I think just because of how I was in high school and stuff, I was pretty shy, but people always knew me as the artsy kid that was always taking pictures. So I think she definitely drew a lot more of the crowd because I barely knew anybody there. But a lot of people showed up for me too. And we just all hung out. And I remember we didn't even have an Instagram yet. So I just had a hashtag, and it was hashtag picture party with an A. And people would show up, kind of making fun of it, being picture party, picture party. And I was, cringing, but I stuck by it. And then after that event, I got super inspired, and I just started an Instagram and then planned the next one. And she and I kind of fell off. She ended up moving somewhere and we just didn't talk anymore. And I think she just I don't know, maybe she just liked the other group better or whatever. So I just started doing my own thing by myself with it. And then my friends at the time, they were like, do you need help? I'll be a part of your team. Just do it. And so that's kind of where Ellie comes in. I think we were about a year into it already before I met her. And we did one in North Park, and it was this bitter Valentine theme. And we just had everyone wear red and black and do cool makeup, and we had a makeup artist there. And that was the biggest one at the time. I think we had 70 people.
Oh, dang.
Which was cool. Just to get enough people convinced, to show up like that. That was cool. But yeah, that was essentially what it was. And we would do an event every single month. And then it would fluctuate with how many people were on my team, but for the most part, it was my close-knit group of friends. And then Ellie, I met Ellie at that one. That was the first one that she went to. and she just offered to help out. And I was like, that's the best way to like get to know me, just like be a part of what I'm doing. And yeah, we got super close after that, and she would just like always be helping out. And I was like, do you just want to like be a part of the team with me? And so yeah, we started kind of primarily being the only ones doing it, as other people started like getting busier and stuff. Just like being 16, it's a delicate time to like start a business. It was unheard of for a 16-year-old to be organizing things. So I couldn't expect anybody to like put school aside or put work aside to like focus on it. But it was my priority at the time, for sure.
Where are you going to school?
I was going to school at UC Irvine, studying film. Yeah, so by the time I was 16, 17, I graduated high school early because I was like that kid that like didn't want to be there. And I was like, how do I get out of here the fastest and like with the best grades? So I made it a priority to like try to find a fast track out of there. And so luckily my school, they had a whole program with like Mesa College where I could just like take classes and then be kind of working towards my GED while I was finishing up my high school diploma, which is cool. And then, yeah, so I did that. And then I think, yeah, I graduated at 17. And then it was like the summer where I was like doing picture party and then just waiting for college acceptance letters. But yeah, I went to UC Irvine. It was like the only school that accepted me because I think too I was overwhelmed by the idea of like picking one thing for the rest of my life, and the idea of going to college just like resembled that to me. It was like, okay, pick a subject that you are passionate about, and I was like, I don't know. I'm passionate about everything, or I knew for sure there were some things I wasn't passionate about. So that helped me narrow it down a bit. I knew at the very least that if I was going to go to school, it was going to be art related. So that's what I did. And I ended up being a film major. And then, yeah, I was still doing picture party, but I didn't have a car. I didn't have money. So I would take the Greyhound down every month to like go to it. And there were some times where it just like felt impossible for me to get there. And at that point, you know, we're like 2-3 years into it, and people were like, you can't miss your own thing that you do every single month. Like, you show up for us, we'll show up for you. Like, let me come pick you up or whatever. So that was really cool.
Yeah, that sounds really awesome. So you were doing an event every month?
Yeah, I think by the time everything was all wrapped up, we did 29 events.
Dang.
In the course of 4 years. Yeah, and I think the biggest one ended up being more than like 200 or 300 people.
Wow.
It was just so cool. You know, to accomplish all of that before the age of 18 is crazy.
Yeah. Could anyone come to the events or?
Yeah, so I think at the time, especially being 16 years old myself, I was seeing people of like 18 and up going to these like cool events, or at the time I forget what the name of it was, but there was this group too they ended up having like a whole scandal. But there's this group led by this guy, and he would do these like art shows in like clubs, and so it was strictly 21 and up. And I was like, you know, what can I do? I can't get older any faster, so like I need something to like spend my time at too. And so that was like a huge influence into picture party. So I was like, whoever wants to come can come. We definitely attracted younger people just because I was young, and I think there was definitely some bias. Like, older people would come and they'd be like, it's weird to be listening to a 16-year-old telling me what to do, so I'm not gonna do that, which is totally fine. Like, I learned really quickly that I shouldn't take offense to if people feel like they just want to be a part of other communities. Like, it doesn't take away from what I'm able to provide to certain people. Like, not every community is for everybody. Yeah. So that was totally cool. But yeah, anyone could come. And then we ended up kind of having this like really wide range of people. Like, people who'd been doing it for 20 years and people who that was the day that they started. And I was like, I thought that was really valuable.
Did you invite a lot of photographers, or was it just mostly people that their photos like taken?
It was a good mix. I think the ratios were usually well paired, where it was maybe 2/3 models, 1/3 photographers. So it was nice because then like models could pair up with each other, or you would have a photographer be able to shoot like 10 people within the course of 2 hours, because
Yeah.
like it just planned out that way. And so yeah, it was nice that people could get to know each other and just like make friends. Like a lot of that was happening too in front of me, and so that was cool.
How many friends do you think you made out of that?
My whole network is people who like. My whole network is people who knew me from Picture Party or heard about me about Picture Party. Like, yeah, I'm just thinking about my life as it is now, and I think every opportunity that has come since, or just like the way my life laid out after that, has been thanks to those relationships. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's really crazy to think about. Let me make sure my.
Oh no, it was my phone.
Oh, okay.
I was gonna ask, like, what do you think would have happened if you hadn't done it?
Oh God. I would have probably been. And we were talking about this offline, but just this perception of me in high school of being this like shy, introverted kid, I think I would have really cemented that into my brain. Even though I didn't want to be that person, I really kind of tried to drive away from that impression with people. And at the end of the day, you can't control what people think of you, but it was important to me when I was 16. So I made it a point with Picture Party to like try to force myself out of it if that's what I think the trajectory I was going in. And so if it hadn't been there, I mean, I wouldn't have been as, I think, just like confident in anything. Like I was doing things that I had no business doing, in like just running a business, creating branding, like talking to adults about like these very tangible and like basically asking them, hey, can you donate your time? Can you donate your resources to this like group of kids to come and hang out in your space, or come and do this, or play with your cameras or whatever. And every single time they were like, wow, you're so mature, you put together, and really seem to know what you're doing. You're very passionate. So if I hadn't had those experiences to tell me otherwise, from the thoughts of what I had with becoming just insecure and shy, then I probably would have been that,
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think I would have probably not tried all the things that I did try, and definitely not be who I am today in terms of like doing multiple things and being proud of that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really awesome. So you went to school for film. Like, what is that like? Like, because I mean, I do video to some extent, but I've never been like formally trained. Like, I don't know. I would just like to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so at UC Irvine, they're definitely not a film school in the sense that you're working with cameras all the time and whatnot, but they had a nice program where it was probably 70% and then 30% working with gear, 30% working with gear, 70% working with just the analysis of films that are already made, and writing essays and like really thinking through the choices that the filmmaker made in those movies. Ironically enough, I preferred that over being with equipment all the time.
Yeah.
Like there was something really, I think, that I felt fit my personality already, which was like to analyze things very deeply. And so to do that for school, like I was in the zone. I was like writing essays and getting A's, and it was easy for me because I already enjoyed doing that. And it just like, once you do that for school, like you never watch a movie the same way. So that's part of also why like me and my boyfriend, who also went to the same school and studied film, like we have a podcast where we like watch movies and then analyze them, because it's just something that we even miss about going to school and doing. So yeah, I definitely enjoy that. And then, yeah, the other part was like they didn't have like the greatest state of the art equipment, but we like made it work, and we would make these little movies with our classmates and stuff. And then the pandemic hit, and I was a junior, so the last year and a half that I had where I had gotten accepted to the art school, and they had like a very specific, like you work in a sound stage and do all the things program, I got maybe like 2/4 of that. And then everything else was online through Zoom. So it wasn't as helpful or engaging anymore. But yeah, I got through it. But yeah, it wasn't as fun because we weren't working with the things that like incentivized us to do the program in the first place. And with that program, it was called Digifilm. It was at risk of getting shut down like every time, and I was like,
That's
well,
wild.
am I gonna finish my minor or no? Like, yeah, but that's the longest story ever told, which is that like the arts aren't respected or funded ever. So, yeah.
Have you done any like projects outside like that you like made, like any films?
I'm working on one right now that I started when I was in school. So, for some context, I always like define myself as a multifaceted artist based in Nicaragua or based out of Nicaragua, because Nicaragua, I would hope, especially now, influences a lot of my work. It's where I'm from, but also once I moved back here, it was something that I lost touch with. And so in 2018, when I was a sophomore or junior in college, that was also the time when protests were happening in Nicaragua, and a lot of people were killed. Essentially what happened is that they raised the retirement age and lowered the retirement benefits. But in Latin cultures, like a lot of families live together, so you like live with your grandparents and whatnot. And so students, people my age, were like stepping on the streets, and they were primarily who were getting killed because they were speaking up for their grandparents, and the government attacked them and killed them. So it was hard for me to watch that and like be living this like American life that I like completely clouded me from all the privilege that I have now. And so it was definitely like a hard-hitting thing that happened, and I was worried about my parents too because they never left. So I was, checking in on them and whatnot. And then as I was in school for film, I was like, fuck, dude, like nothing about film school ever touches on anything outside of Western media. Like, every media representation, it's like actually inaccurate or just not telling the story of the other person. And so, I mean, I feel like I kind of knew that, but it definitely hit home when I was like seeing the way in which it like truly affected people around me. So while I was in school, I basically decided that I was going to be the annoying kid that made everything about my culture. So if there was an assignment with an open-ended sort of timeline of like, or geographic location, like we'd have to like write papers on like pick a culture's like media representations and tell me what it tells you about who they are and their history. And I'd always pick Nicaragua because I was like, there isn't enough here. But it would make my job harder because, our databases just don't have any information. You can't you don't go into the library and find like a whole section about my little country. And so it definitely made me more proud to do the work because I was like, well, if I'm not going to do it, then it doesn't exist. So I kind of took that sentiment with me and decided that I was going to finish out school, making sure that every project was about my country in some way. And I got to do like an independent study with my favorite professor at the time. And she was just like, what do you want to talk about your family or about Nicaragua? And I was like, well, there's this whole history about my family's involvement in the politics of Nicaragua that I don't fully know, but I was there when I was 6 and I like saw it firsthand, and I think I can pull something from that. I basically ended up reaching back out to my family who I hadn't talked to the entire time that I moved back here. So, 8+ years. And I was like, hey, so, that uncle I had that like died, but he also ran for president. Like, what happened with that? And, they filled in the blanks for me. And essentially, my family has just like a long history of being involved in the revolution from the 80s, in politics in the 2000s. And then, he was killed. And, my family speculates that the current president, Daniel Ortega, was involved. And so that's like such a rich history for me to like never have bothered to think about and never have done anything with. And so I made it a point that was going to be the focus of my final film for school. Because it was the pandemic and we were doing school from home anyway, I just went back home, back to Nicaragua for the first time. And I just like kind of went from there. I took a bunch of rolls of film with me, and so a lot of the film is like mixed media with that because I was too scared to bring all of my equipment. I just feel like they would have flagged me in some way, like my last name's already on my passport. Like I just didn't want to make it like a thing. And there's just like so much government corruption that there was no way that I could get away with that. So I decided I'll just like keep it low key. And I'd seen films in school that were kind of like shot on iPhone, shot on whatever. And it kind of tells you something about, that moment in history. Like, why wasn't someone able to bring, that kind of equipment to, like, just the quality of a film can tell you so much about the ability of the filmmaker to actually make it and what that tells you about that point in history that they were even allowed to make it, like there's so cool. Like, Iranian filmmaking was so cool to learn about too, because the way in which filmmakers would find metaphorical ways of criticizing the government because they couldn't outright say it. So I definitely pulled all that inspiration into this, and it's still not finished. So it's been a project that I've been working on for now 3 years, basically, because I just struggle with feeling like this kind of representation, like you only get one chance to get it right. And so I've definitely, all of my perfectionist tendencies have now been brought into attention, where I'm just like, all right, like I'm just going to spend 40 hours on the first minute and a half, knowing that I have, another 10 pieces to go. But I am going to Vancouver next week to kind of get a proper recording, because at the time it was like a Zoom call, and there was like, I was recording from my end and other people were across the world. So I'm balancing between having the ability to capture certain things with great equipment and also knowing that it's a nice touch to kind of have that like rawness of you couldn't, and why couldn't you? So that's what I'm working on. It's a day-by-day thing, and obviously I cut up in my life here, and then I feel guilty about it too. So, it's a dilemma.
I mean, sounds like a lot of like rich history, and like you were saying, you don't want to like, it's the only time you can like introduce some things like once and stuff. So, I'm sure it's like a lot. But that's really cool that you're doing that. Like, let me know whenever you finish that.
I will. I think you asked me like if I'd been in a different podcast before, and I remembered like my first podcast appearance was for this podcast called Ellas. It's specifically Latin women voices, and they interviewed me. And at the time, I think I was about halfway through my film, and I got to talk through that, and I was like, oh yeah, I'll finish it by summer. Like, I'm excited to let everybody know.
For sure. I mean, it's a big project, so take your time with it.
I think filmmaking, sometimes I get these like random sentences and I'll write it down, and I remember like one time I wrote down that filmmaking is like the art of patience or something, and because I've never been a patient person, it's one of the hardest things for me to do. Everything that I do now, I think, has come to me in some level by just like the nature of it. Like I didn't have to try too hard to be a photographer or try too hard to do makeup or try too hard to do modeling, because there was just already a natural inclination towards it, so it wasn't hard.
Yeah.
But something about really sitting with a film and like making it what you want to make it, and knowing it could take years and years. Like for some people, it takes 12 years to make a movie. It's a really hard thing to come to terms with.
Yeah.
And that's all I can say about that. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I don't know why I just remembered when people would write like scripts and they would do like I guess like a first episode or something, and then stuff gets picked, stuff doesn't. There's stuff that's just been thrown out for like forever. So like film is definitely like kind of crazy.
Yeah, I think that too. Like, maybe I did myself. Sometimes, like, I ask myself if I did myself a disservice by, focusing on something so delicate and personal to me, because I think like a lot of people get their start in film writing movies about whatever. Like,
Yeah.
oh, here's a cat. Or here's, I don't know, like anything about anything. It could be super silly. It could be very like impersonal. But something I really had a hard time with going to school for film was that I quickly realized I don't do narrative and fictional stories very well. Like I can't really start world building on something that isn't already based on my experience.
Yeah.
So I found myself gravitating towards documentary filmmaking because I was like, well, that's just telling the truth, right? But then everything has its biases, and you do control the narrative to the same extent, if anything. But I just felt like that was better for me, because then I could think about the truths that are hidden.
Yeah.
That we don't talk about. So that's why documentary filmmaking is something I'm passionate about. But yeah, it's hard, and then because it's so personal to me, it's hard to share with other people, and it's hard to like bring an editor in and be like, okay, like give it a shot, and then they do, and I'm like, no, that's not what I wanted.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm doing literally everything by myself, and I'm okay with it, but it just means it takes more time, and that in some ways I have to acknowledge my own limitations. Like I'm not gonna be able to make animations for the film because it's not something I can do, or if I wanted to do it, I would have to really sit down and learn a new skill, and those things take time. So leveraging whether I want to make the time to learn all those things or not it's part of the process.
Yeah. Definitely. We're gonna take a quick break. This camera does die every 30 minutes, so
okay, cool.
We'll be right back, guys. All right, guys, so we are back, and I just kind of wanted to transition into like maybe like asking you, like, I mean, since you are like a photographer, we mentioned this a little bit outside of the podcast, but just because I saw like the post of like Levi's doing their first AI shoot, and like I know a lot of creatives are like, I know I'm kind of getting scared, like even of going further into music because of AI, just because like there's even like AI artists that have come out. There was a record label that signed to AI. Like it's crazy. So like
there's so many feelings with that come with it. I mean, so basically Levi's announced very proudly that they're going to start using AI models for their shoots.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw a lot of my mutuals sort of share that on Instagram as well. And do you need me to put it closer?
Oh, no, you're good. You're
okay.
good.
I saw a lot of my mutuals put it on their Instagram stories as well. I basically said, fuck Levi's for that, because that's so disrespectful.
Mm-hmm.
And other models happen to have had experiences specifically with Levi's being like, they treated me horribly on that set, like all of this, all of that. And I was like, see, it even adds more layers to that, I could go on for hours and hours about the disrespect that like models experience. And I have a unique perspective on it because I started off as a photographer, and then I moved into modeling. And I feel like both of them feed into each other so much. Like, if you get a chance to work with a model that has been a photographer, they are just so different than working with a model who only models. Like,
Yeah.
there's one thing learning your angles and learning to like find light and like create shapes with your body. That's totally like what a model does. But when you're a photographer as well, you have like a second language to speak to the person behind the camera and sort of say, I already know what you want, so I'm just going to put myself in that position. Yeah. Or because you're using this camera or this lens or these like the setup, then I know what I'm working with, what my limitations are. And that's something that you would have to communicate to a traditional model. And so I feel like I'm very valuable in that sense, working on set with people. But that's all to say, like, yeah, the thought that technology will eventually like replace us is pretty crazy.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about it a lot, just in the sense of, I think like there's trends and niches that get created as we evolve in this like world of the internet. And so what will content that people are attracted to look like if content can be auto-generated? Mm-hmm. Like how much more vulnerable can you get on social media and all these things, or how much more human can you appear to overcompensate for the fact that we're being replaced by generated like things? And so it's really scary. Also, this like TikTok ban is very interesting too. Yeah. Like, I feel like all the currents are being pulled right now on like everything, and I'm lacking the patience with people to like understand where there's the disconnect anymore. Because it's happening like right in front of us. Like they're proudly saying what they're not wanting to say. So yeah, I'm thinking with that specifically, I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. There's kind of no winning in this situation. I think, I've gotten interviews with like Newsweek and stuff where they'll ask me about my experiences modeling, because I talk about it a lot, especially when I was more upset about things earlier on, just, the sexual harassment that can go on, just like straight up disrespect, uncomfortable situations, straight up just dangerous stuff that goes on for women that are involved. And I started modeling when I started Picture Party too, so I was 16, modeling for grown men that should know better. And I just like, I don't know how it didn't happen to me, but, I was lucky that I didn't get straight up assaulted sometimes. But it was a situation where if I didn't know better, it could have happened. And so I just know every model has had an experience where it's just to the point where now you're sharing your location with your friends every time you're on a shoot. Mm-hmm. And you have to bring somebody with you, or like just all this crazy stuff. Or I have to vet somebody, or like somebody that I know has to have shot with them before I even think about it. And at this point in my career, like I don't do anything that's not paid pretty much, but that's a privileged position as well. Because if you're just starting out, you kind of have to do things for free.
Yeah.
But yeah, I empathize a lot with models, because you never hear about models being a pain on set or doing something disrespectful. Like, yeah, they can be late and they can like be about themselves sometimes, like that kind of thing, but doesn't really hurt anyone. You always hear about the other party, the people really in power in those sets and situations that are doing the disrespecting. So I'm just curious about how that will play out when there aren't any models and it's AI. Like, somebody's making and building those models for them. So it's kind of like VFX, how that's such an overlooked aspect of filmmaking.
Yeah.
I learned this in school as well. It's just like, it's an industry that severely underpays. They have like literal sweatshops for VFX where people get paid like pennies to edit frames of a movie. And they're these like big budget movies. And at the end of the day, they get like no credit, no recognition. So many VFX houses go bankrupt after they make a movie because they've like had to pay for all that labor, and then the movie company didn't pay them in time or didn't do something. So I'm just thinking about how we're moving in that direction of if everything's going to be automated, then what will really feel natural about being on social media, being on the internet at all? I'm curious how, because we're a little far apart on age, like, how do you sort of interact with the internet? Like, is it something that you use as a tool to like advance the things you're already working on, or do you feel a need to share about yourself in like a vulnerable way and an intimate way with people because other people are seeing you or people are seeing you?
It just really depends on what like I'm wanting to like share. So I guess most of my page is just either like just podcast stuff, but I mean to some extent I am like semi artist, so like whenever I write songs or anything like that, like I do share like kind of what I'm going through or what I'm not going through. I don't think a lot of people might not like that. So like every time I drive home, I always put like a post of like how I feel. Sometimes I might be like feeling like really sad or something. Sometimes I don't. So it's just really my personality. Like even when I was younger, I would go up to people and just tell them, oh yeah, my parents got divorced and this and that. And then I would just tell them like my story. But now like, I try to protect that more just for me. Cause sometimes people don't really like appreciate that, or they'll just be like weirded out. And so I can't really control those reactions. So now I've defaulted into like just telling like the closest people things that like I am going through, but I'm not scared if someone like asks me, or, sometimes like I'll post stuff, but it just really depends.
Yeah, it was an interesting transition for me because I think I got on Instagram for the very first time when I was like 12 or 13. And I was like, I had these like fan accounts that I was running, and like I'd get a bunch of followers and I'd be like, wait, they don't know me. They don't know anything about me. I feel like a fake person, so I'm going to delete it. And then my Instagram, it became this thing where I like obsessively would look at it. I look at my page more than I look at anybody else's because I'm always like, okay.
I try not to look at mine because it's just podcast stuff, but
yeah, like I always look at my rows and I'm like, this is off. Like,
Yeah.
I wish I could take that post down and repost it, or why didn't that get enough love or whatever. And, it gets bad to a point. But I've recently, I don't know, I used to be like, damn, people are taking breaks from social media. It can't be how is it a good thing that you end up coming back,
Yeah.
And as someone who has recently been taking, time off my phone as much as I can, I'm like, it really does like draw you back because you feel a sense of responsibility to share with the world what's going on with you, share with the people around you, just because, or like, I just can't believe there was a time in our lives, or, I kind of grew up in it where, because I was in Nicaragua, I didn't have internet like at home. And the only way I could get in touch with like my brothers or something was if I went to like an internet cafe and I called them and I paid by the minute. But also like I had a Facebook account then, and all I would do is play games on Facebook. But it was also my way of like seeing people that I didn't talk to. And so to take that to the next level of like, we're always expected to be in touch with people all the time because we have our phones right next to us. I used to get so upset when people wouldn't respond to me for like days. Now with like if you take more than 2 weeks to answer my texts, I'm like, and then we're in the middle of a conversation, I'm like, come on. But yeah, I mean, it's crazy that we like expect people to, have access to technology like that and have access to us like that. But it also came naturally for me to overshare. Like growing up with shows like iCarly and stuff, like it just made it seem cool to like put my whole self on the internet. And it hasn't backfired for me. Like, I don't know. I'd share like stupid poems I'd written about boys, or like just art. Like I think so much of my art is about what I'm going through and experiencing and stuff. So it doesn't, I think as an artist we already overshare. So then to overshare on the internet doesn't make a ton of a difference.
Yeah.
But you made a point about like sharing what you're going through and stuff, and like how you'll post every now and then about that. And I resonated with that because in the last like year and a half, I think I've finally been able to, I guess, make time to acknowledge how everything has affected me, like growing up and stuff. Just, not everyone gets the privilege to like go to therapy and things like that. And so for me to be able to do that and sort of acknowledge all of those things, it has helped me for sure to be a better artist too.
Yeah.
And just a better person. But what I would say about that is like, I got to my lowest point where I really thought about and contemplated taking my own life last year. And then I shared that I was in the hospital on my socials, and I just remembered like being too overwhelmed by everyone's responses.
Yeah.
And then a couple weeks ago, I was kind of in that same sort of headspace, and I was like, damn, like I feel like I'm not making that much progress from where I was a year ago, and like what about everything that happened in between, blah blah blah. And then I kind of did like a talking video, and I was like, I don't know why, but I just feel drained by the idea of like interacting with people, but then at the same time, like it feels like community is what I need right now, and I don't know how to explain that to anyone. And so a lot of people reached out and they're like, let's hang out, let's do this. And I was like, I can't, like, and so I like deleted everything. I was like, I can't do it anymore. And yeah, I feel like so much of it can be that. But I think what gets to me the most is like, some people have told me like that they'll see my stuff and that's the reason they've given up on their own journeys as artists. And I think they meant it as a compliment, but it was not.
Yeah.
Because I would, and I think about it a lot. I'm like, okay, if I post this like set and people see like I got published or something, they'll think it was easy, or they'll just see it for that. They won't know anything they won't know that I cried on my way there. They won't know like anything. But then I don't also want to share every single bad thing that happens, and so it's definitely a balancing act. But I become really aware of that because I don't know, I just don't want my persona online, kind of like how I don't want people to think I'm an introvert and extrovert based on however I'm acting that day or whatever.
Yeah.
Like if all you're forming about me is based on what I show you, then I become hyper aware of what I'm showing you, and I don't want to do that. The second I do that, I don't want to be online. So it's a hard thing. Like some days I'm like, I don't even want to be on any of this stuff anymore. And then I get a lot of joy from other creators and like the things other people are sharing. I think we're in such an interesting point in our lives where anyone can sort of experience overnight success.
Yeah.
But then like how many people are using it for good reasons, So I kind of was always of the mentality that I wanted to be one of those people that could find overnight success, and that I have things of value to share with the world, and that I would use it for good reasons. But the way these systems are set up for anyone, it just doesn't make us usually better people. Like me coming to America and like living out the American dream, quote unquote, like didn't make me a better person for the little kid that I left behind of myself. It just made me try to forget her. For the same ways that like parents won't teach their kids Spanish because they just don't want you to suffer like they did. Like it's kind of the same idea. I definitely like distance myself from anything that could bring me like prejudice from people.
Yeah. No, I definitely feel that. There's certain aspects of me where like I don't really like Spanish. Like I don't want to teach my kids Spanish just because I don't know how to explain it, but like when I was younger, like to be like Mexican or anything like that was like to be poor. So like I used to live like on some apartments right across from the Coronado, and I always hated people at Coronado because they had the life that like I wanted, but I was on the other side. So even now when like people come to like Barrio Logan and shit, like I'm like, what the fuck are you doing here, bro? You wouldn't have been here if it wasn't like
gentrified.
yeah. and so it pisses me off. So like, there's little things like that where like I kind of feel somewhat similar.
Yeah, there's too many examples, but yeah, I think for me, one that I've been noticing recently is like it's cute and quirky to add Spanish words into like your everyday sort of talk, like no problemo or
Yeah.
whatever. And I'm just like, bitch, the ways people would make fun of me because I couldn't find the word in English, so I would speak in Spanglish. And so much of that meant that I wasn't smart enough, or meant that I wasn't trying enough,
Yeah.
or meant that I just like, I wasn't assimilating hard enough.
Yeah.
And you know, now it's like cute and cool. Another thing I noticed, like especially this last summer, and I see it popping up again, is like some fashion trends are sort of gravitating towards like traditional Mexican clothing, and I'm like, this was always a thing. The little like flowers on your shirts, the like sort of crocheted aesthetic, like all of
Yeah.
that was already a thing. But now that white people are wearing it, or it's just like in the mainstream, it's suddenly cool when I used to get made fun of for the same stuff. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah. No, there's a lot definitely there.
Yeah.
So aside from that, I guess what are some tips you would give people? Like I don't know, I guess like not necessarily presenting yourself, but like how to like I guess like be you and also like be successful. Because it's so easy. Like I guess I wasn't really like intending on talking about this, but I went to school to learn theology, so I actually studied to be a pastor.
Oh, really?
And yeah, it wasn't until I was like, what is it, the third year, junior year? I started asking myself, like, where's my culture? You know, because they were giving me like books that were like written like years ago and by like certain people, but those are like the classic people. And so I would ask myself, like, man, like, where's my like culture? Like, I understand you guys always have this like catalog, but like, I'm sure there's something that like my culture could have brought to some extent. And so I started learning a little bit about like just some like Spanish like priests, and they were like talking about, well, so like I'm a Christian, but Catholics aren't like as respected by certain Christians because of their theology or whatever. But that was kind of I forgot the name of the guy, but he ended up doing like the first kind of like World Council for like ethics for like people. So he was saying like to some extent that like the natives like in Mexico, like we should treat them as humans, you know, like we shouldn't be like taking over their land and doing all this other shit. And so like for me, when I learned about that to some extent, I was like, oh, that's actually like pretty cool, you know, but like I wouldn't have learned about any of that stuff. And so I started diving more into like a deeper path of like just trying to learn stuff outside of what was like normal for like a Christian tradition. And I ended up like learning a lot, but it also kind of made me go away from like wanting to be like an established pastor with like any like big denominations that are like out here right now. So
Yeah. Somehow I like found my way into like almost all of my partners being Christian or being pastors' kids. So that definitely played a role into my growing up, where like my brothers and my family never imposed any like religion onto me. In fact, like it was something that they sort of were against, because like they were LGBT, or like we're people of color, and like it just didn't make sense for us. So I found it all on my own, and it was like these white kids from school that I like sort of held on a pedestal. And I started to, you know, be deeply affected by this idea that like because I wasn't white, I could never be as close to God as like they could, and
Yeah.
or the way that they presented. And then I quickly learned that like it's all kind of like something I didn't touch on, but like one of the hardest things about creating a community with people is just how much that brings out of people. Like to be in community with someone is like kind of bearing the weight of everything that they are and all of their mistakes and whatnot. And so like the whole concept of like church and like people being together all the time on a weekly basis, like that is unavoidably like something where there will be issues.
Yeah.
But I feel like the church takes such a passive stance. Like all of my successes were something that they could flex, and all of my hardships were something that they were not involved in. And the irony just like got to me. Not only that, but then like my mentor at the church ended up being like a child predator and outed by like the person that was affected. And I hear about it years later or whatever. And like I just like I can't even believe that I put myself in those situations. So I don't love organized religion. And then like learning all the history of how it's affected like communities, like indigenous groups, and just missions in general, and like what that means. But I respect that people believe in something, and I could totally see why. And I did at some point too, when everything felt like I needed to. But yeah, I guess the thought that I would be less than from somebody who does believe was really hard for me. And I think that's all to say, like, back to your question about tips and what I would encourage people to do is like, it changes all the time, and that maybe change is one of the things that you should expect and get comfortable with. And if you can do that, then anything that comes your way will go okay. Like, and self-love and self-esteem, I used to think were the corniest things, because I was like, oh, who needs that? Who needs like mental health and all these things, like therapy, like, or whatever you need to help you and be a better person, like do it and get it. And if you have the access to it. What I will say about community though is that I never felt as alive and as well when I was in community as when I'm not. Like, to do something for somebody else, it just helps you so much. Like it kind of circles back to being a selfish thing.
Yeah.
Because like I just remember feeling so good about seeing somebody be at a picture party, and they like were shooting their first photos for the first time, and they come up to me, they'd be like, Lily, look at this, like I just took these pictures and they're so cool. And like to know that I created that space, like that does something for me that like no antidepressant could do, no like lecture at church could do. Like there's just something invaluable about helping people. And I think because of the way we're set up now, like it's really hard to help people without compromising something else that we need to do. Like just the whole thing about like being our own individuals, and the way like capitalism and things are set up so that we don't really think about our neighbor. Like those were the Christian values that I appreciated, like going and doing like food drives, going and doing this and that. But everybody kind of has an agenda. And even non-religious people have an agenda,
Yeah.
So it's hard, and I think that's why my hope is to one day like be able to live in Nicaragua again, and like sort of be a part of that. Like I can't think of a better sort of outcome for me than to have like spent 20 years in the U.S. gathering all that I know and being and becoming who I am, and then taking that all back home and like doing something with it, like be it like an education program for kids so that they can be filmmakers too. And we stop seeing like these bad media representations of what Nicaragua is. Like it's not just a poor country in the middle of nowhere. We have value and people and things that will soon, be something that won't exist anymore. So, I think, I don't know. Advice is hard. It just depends on who you are, but I think surrounding yourself with people you can trust too, and that I think about how corny I was when I was 16, and I remember I got mad at my friends because I was like, why did you guys let me be so corny? Why did you let me like try all these things and suck at it? And like now I'm like watching this video of like when I did this one thing and I was just so bad at it. But like that's what love really is. It's like let somebody try something they suck at and let them suck at it. Like that's part of doing and growing and being all the things. But I, as a perfectionist, just like thought I could be good at it from the bat, and it just doesn't work that way. So that's something I miss about my old self. It's like I really would like go head on about things, thinking it's fine. Like I'll figure it out. I don't need to watch a YouTube video. I'm already a pro. Like, and like obviously when I was around people that knew better than me, like I wasn't gonna pretend like I knew it all, but it was cool that I wasn't afraid to suck. And I think as I've gotten older, I am afraid to suck. Like I'm just afraid of wasting my time as if my time is finite. But we were talking about that too, and I was like, you know, we're just gonna keep getting older, and the more I sit around and delay sucking at something, it doesn't stop me. Like me waiting 5 years to start something isn't gonna stop me from being bad at it when I first start. So someone said, like, if you start now, then you will like suck less sooner.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah, I think I definitely have taken that into everything that I do now.
Yeah, it's a good one, definitely, because you could easily be a perfectionist and not get to where you want to be. So, yeah, well, I think that's it for the podcast. I appreciate you so much coming through.
Of course.
And I hope this was a lot of fun.
Thank you.
We'll see you guys. Thanks for watching. Peace.